Hello folks and welcome to our game this Thursday morning with myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as ever, well, occasionally by Fintan O'Toole of the 42.
You've confused me with Verney there straight away, have you? With the
actually, unfortunately it's on a somber note that Michael Verney doesn't join us today because his uncle Kevin passed away this week. Kevin had been a regular watcher of the show. We'd met him at a couple of our events, including one last year on Pukon. Unfortunately, he had been ill and passed away on Monday. So look, we pass on our condolences to the Verney family because he was a great follower of GAA. So condolences to all his friends and family. Kevin or Fintan, how are you today?
Oh, good, Shane. Oh, good. Can't complain. Bit bleak weather-wise in Cork. Don't want to say in Dublin, but doesn't look like good summer hurling championship weather anyway. We're a bit away from that yet.
No, it's cat enough in Dublin so far. We've actually got Michael Fennelly on the line straight away. Michael, how are you doing? Are we after catching you off guard, Michael? Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear us there. No, we'll just hopefully we'll get Michael there in a second if he can hear us okay. So I suppose, yeah, just a little bit thrown off by that. Couple of double headers in the Munster Championship this year. We've noticed that already, Fintan, that there's going to be 5 Munster Senior Hurling Championships that'll be preceded by provincial camogie clashes, and it'll be the same in the football as well.
Yeah, it seems like a good move. I think they did bits of it last year. I think the Munster Ladies Football Final was before the Munster Senior Football Final. Kerry, Limerick that day. Seems a kind of sensible thing in terms of pitch availability for one. You know, there's constantly this thing in camogie and ladies football. They're very difficult to get pitches. So yeah, seems like a good success last year and a good thing to keep it going.
Yeah, Michael, can you hear us this time? Oh, we can't hear you, Michael. Your mic is muted. I'm not sure exactly why, but it says your mic is muted. This is the joys of it on a Thursday morning. We're not long out of bed at all, Fintan. I'll just put Michael in the background there for a second, and hopefully the mic will come back in. But that is the joys of it. That is the joys of it. Yeah, as you were saying about the double headers. By the way, the AIB GAA club teams of the year, you saw those coming out, I suppose, in the last couple of days. The football one, Conor Ferris, what a rags to riches story for him. Michael Warnock, Ryan Dugan, Dan O'Brien, Andrew McGowan, Rory O'Carroll, Ethan Doherty. Midfield, David Moore. He was unbelievable against Kilmacud that day. Alongside Emmett Bradley. Then a half-forward line of Jack Doherty, Shane Cunningham and Sean Kelly, Darragh Mullen, Danny Tallon and Shane Walsh. Yeah,
pretty weighted towards Kilmacud and Glen, I suppose, as expected, with the two exceptions being probably reflective of how prominent those two players were, Sean Kelly and Mike Cullen and David Moore. And I mean, I think you were there that day, were you? The club football semi-finals, you know, when we kind of, a lot of us, well, maybe incorrectly thought, I did anyway, I thought this was a sign Warren was going to stay on for another year with Kerry, you know, but it was maybe kind of his Croke Park swan song. But it was a very, very prominent display. Yeah, I suppose, given the nature of what happened in the football final, you know, Conor Ferris being involved, the Darragh Mullen thing, it's probably been overlooked maybe how good some of these guys were actually throughout the campaign, you know. Like, it doesn't seem many of them, Kilmacud fellas, have been drafted into the Dublin setup. I don't know, do you find this, I suppose obviously you played at the level to know, but sometimes I'm looking at these February, March, All-Ireland Club semi-finals games in January, and you're thinking, right, this guy's going to get called in. But I suppose you sometimes then, you kind of do a bit of digging and you check it out and you kind of have to remind yourself, I suppose, what kind of a step up it is to kind of between the club and county. But definitely, like, I thought Mullen was brilliant this year, Dan O'Brien as well, Shane Cunningham as well, kind of consistently for them. And they played at Dublin underage, and I suppose you're hearing a lot about Dublin's depth at the moment, so maybe it's gone too far in the season now. Asked Desi Farrell a couple of weeks ago after one of their matches, aside from Mannion, who else was kind of in, and he said just a couple of others. Obviously, they're not really, there's nothing even revealed in that sense. I think Craig Diaz was on the bench for the Clare match, I think, last Saturday week. But yeah, I guess it will be interesting to see will any of them maybe come into the frame now.
Yeah, Andy McGowan, he'd been there before as well. And the the nominees for the Footballer of the Year, Ryan Dugan, Shane Cunningham and Dara Mullen. We'll go for a third time lucky with Michael Fennelly. How are you?
I think I'm good, lads, am I? Can you hear me?
Finally,
all good.
Finally, we're in business. How are things with you?
Not too bad. It's the snow. The snow is deflating here, the audio sound.
Well, just so people know, you're part of our coaching clinic that's going to be in Valley Rovers, County Cork on Saturday alongside Brick Walsh and Pat Ryan. You can get the link to the tickets in the video description. Can you just give us a bit of an overview of what you might be covering in Valley Rovers on Saturday?
Yeah, so myself, Brick and Pat, we've kind of divided out this session, and what I'd be looking at is kind of pressure play from teams, and again, making decisions under pressure, trying to get turnovers, how much pressure actually players putting on the opposition. So just looking at different variations, different ways, and building up towards that. And essentially, I suppose, on the other hand, then you have the other players making decisions under pressure, making those increments of pressure as well. So obviously you don't want to have it at 10 out of 10 straight away. You're building towards that high pressurized zone. So yeah, should be good. And I think Pat's looking at goal scoring. Obviously he's one of the best out there at, and he'll do that in different ways in terms of opposing. And then Brick is going to go through some technical kind of closed drills again to work on the skills of the game.
Yeah, and I think Brick's a bit of an underrated sneer. We had a bit of a WhatsApp group going and set up, and he was talking about getting you involved in training, but of course you never did any training with Kilkenny, as he pointed out.
He didn't say much in the group, and then he put in an essay of what he was going to do, and I was highly impressed with his game plan on Saturday. But I think he might need an hour. He'll need about another hour, I'd say, to do his session. Yeah, he's a character.
And how much of what you're planning on doing is kind of informed by your couple of years with Offaly, and how much did you enjoy that?
Yeah, no, look, without doubt, sure. I think, look, the practical experience is a huge element of what you see and what works, what doesn't work. Now, it's not to say what you see with one team is going to be the same with other teams. It depends on the age group. It depends on the level of that team. And I think for a lot of cases, you have to see what's in front of you, what's working, what's not. I would have found previously, going into kind of pressurized games, kind of a bit early in the session, may not have worked too well. Maybe players needed a bit more to close drills, working on the skills of the game to get comfortable before going into those kind of high pressurized situations. That was one thing that would have stood out, I suppose, in my mind. I suppose all in all with the intercounty scene, Shane, I suppose the biggest thing I found coming in was not being able to switch off. You're constantly every day thinking about the game, thinking about different areas of the game, the styles, your opposition. And I found it very hard to switch off from it, from being in work, from being at home. You'd be talking to yourself an awful lot in terms of different things. And obviously you have a lot of phone calls, and you're the figurehead, and you're probably the delegator of the whole group, and you need to be pulling the strings. So there's a lot of things that need to be tied together. So it's pretty constant. And the funny thing about it is then you don't have that much time with players. So your time with players is quite minimal. And obviously you want to get to the sessions and get into the sessions quickly. You don't want that much downtime with meetings and that. So there are two things. Yeah, constant thinking, constant obsession about the game, linking in and directing with your backroom team, and then with the players, then just very minimal time with them. And if down the years would fly, once you got to league, it just flew.
Fintan, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that thing about the time issue. Do you think it's sustainable for the county managers going forward? There was a line I saw last weekend. Keith Ricken was talking about being in charge of Cork last year, and he mentioned the game they played against Meath, and he was taking CIT for some freshers game, I think, the following day. And he said he checked his phone. I think he had 120, he said, between messages, emails, and missed calls to do with the Cork senior football team in that 24-hour period. I presume you something similar. Is it sustainable to be juggling an county manager role?
Keith had a lot of problems that morning, let's say. So, is it sustainable? The irony is, actually, in my PhD, I comment on this, the sustainability of the games at an amateur level in terms of the level it's gone. Now, as I said, you do meet, 4 times. It's probably minimum 4 times a week, obviously, in terms of group stuff. But but there is times you need to meet and go through the tactics. Tactics has gone massive over the last number of years. So that's not something you can just throw into a session. Sessions need to be an hour and a half odd as well. You can't be going into 2 to 3 hour sessions either, because our sessions don't start till 7 o'clock in the evening or 7:30. They're off, I suppose, the social hour side of things. So is it sustainable? I hope it is, obviously. But I think, I know the GPA maybe are looking at maybe contact hours with players to make sure that they are not being pulled and dragged into, long weekends constantly. Like, like you do need an element of it, but I think you need to protect them as well in terms of their time. So yeah, no, look, it needs to be, Fintan, we need to find a way that works for both parties, really.
Is there
enjoy it? Like when you're in that kind of pressurized element, like I know you're talking about the kind of work involved in it, but is it enjoyable, I guess, the few years you had?
Yeah, God, you wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't enjoyable. Like, that's true, but you love the challenge of it. You love, preparing teams, developing players, and look, it being in high pressurized situations like these are, this is the spotlight every week, every weekend. Like, you're looking at games, you're talking about games, and all the supporters are, and that's hard and that's difficult. And obviously, some games don't go too well, and obviously there's a lot of negative press around it, like at times as well, and that's hard for you, hard for your family, hard for the team. But I suppose, look, if you love that aspect and you love that challenge, well, then that's what life is about, really. I suppose, it's challenging yourself. But there is hard days, without a doubt.
Is there anything that really took you aback or took you by surprise with intercounty management?
I just think like the sessions just fly, between the S&C and the coach, I suppose in particular, and then with video analysis, you're trying to break up the session with all these people, and obviously everyone wants a piece of it. And then, like, I'm not even talking about a sports psychologist here, like, so it was so little time, like what's important now. And I'd love to have a larger pre-season where actually you can prepare a bit longer, get all that kind of foundation, that groundwork done, that heavy work done, that contact time that might be a bit more than normal. And then when the games come, then it should flow a bit easier. But what I find is, like, the games are coming fast. Like, like the Welsh Cup games and Cahill Cup games, all these games are in very, very early January. And there's a big spotlight in these games now as well. Like, these are not just Mickey Mouse games with a couple of hundred people. These games are, there's big crowds, thousands going to these games now. And, like, the players are only in pre-season, like, and there's, there's an awful lot of perception then about, this team's not going well. And literally it's the first week of January. Like, so I'd love to have a proper pre-season, to actually put in the ground, put in the work. The club scene now, ideally, the irony of the split season is the club players actually have the pre-season now. They have a lovely pre-season where you can work on athletic development, you can work on, the tactical side of things. And now, obviously, the league is not going to be as important because you don't have your inter-county players early on. Let's say in Kilkenny, for example, in April, we used to have 2 kind of league championship games. Like, they're obviously gone now. It's just kind of a league without your county boys. So, like, there's very little pressure on those games now, and you can kind of, maybe, for me, I suppose, gradually build through the year, and you're not kind of, looking to peak in April for those couple of games.
So you spent time out with Sydney Swans before, and maybe you've been around other professional setups too, but, like, you probably seen that they can give the players the rest. They can work on the athletic development, sprint work, tactical work, tackling work. I mean, you must be going to a session with Offaly and you're like, okay, I've all this list of things that I'd like to do, but a lot of it I have to prioritize. And then I mightn't get to, for example, do the tackling work over a space of a few weeks. And you see it let you down in a match and you're like, well, what can I do? I've only so much time.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's the thing. And so as manager, you need to weigh up what is important at this moment in time. And look, you're trying to look ahead as well, like, what's coming. So you can't just look short term either. Like, what is the bigger picture here? And obviously, with those setups, like, they're at 4 or 5 days a week, like, and they're actually trying to fill in things, put in fillers. Put in, like, your spinning bike sessions, you have your yoga, you can have Pilates along with your 3 outdoor sessions, and outdoor sessions could be 2 hours plus. And then you have your gym sessions, like, as well, that go on for the hour. Like, so yeah, look, you'd be envious of that environment to a degree, but, like, you work hard in that environment too. You're up at 6 or 5 in the morning, let's say, in some cases, you're home till 6 in the evening. So I don't know what I actually like to be doing that, to be honest, 24/7. I think there is, I even talking to guys in that space, in the professional space, they do kind of, they are envious as well of the GA side of things, where you have a bit more downtime. There's not as much contact time. So yeah, look, it's a mixture of all, I suppose. But yeah, trying to fit everything in, like, players' attention span is not there. They're going to get bored, tired. You can't have long meetings. Meetings can only be 15, 20 minutes max with video analysis. You got to be sharp. You got to be on time. Your warm-up's got to start in time. Your sessions can't go over. Like, what I find is if that drags, energy drains. And so getting all that right is really important.
Yeah, Fintan?
Just to go something kind of separate, that's topical at the moment, the league championship structure. From your point of view, having been in intercounty management, how challenging do you think that is for managers at the moment, that the way there's been a lot of talk about it, that the league is going so hard up against the championship? I mean, do you think when you were obviously winning leagues with Kilkenny, you're probably able to go hard for it, and you might have had 4 weeks before Leinster Championship. Do you see it as very, very challenging at the moment, preparation-wise?
Yeah, no, I'm watching this with interest now the last couple of years. I don't think it's as hard, it's as intense this year, to be honest. I think teams are trying to blood new players and look at other players. And I know in the older system, like you had Group A and a Group B, Group A was mental. Like you had massive championship games every weekend, pretty much in the league. Now again, there is still like talking to some S&C coaches at that level. The numbers are high without a doubt, and it just shows the need for the robustness of the player now that's coming back at intercounty level, that needs to be coming back in really good nick to try and avoid injury. And again, if you're an injury-prone player, it's going to make life much harder. But we got feelings. I don't think they're as intense, to be honest. Now, again, the two groups are quite different. One group is much harder than the other, to be straight up with it. Coming from a Joe McDonough and a League Two, I suppose, and been in League One previously. Like I do find the teams who are at a lower ebb, like that, it's impossible for them. I think, to a certain degree. I think the better teams can obviously, they can be smarter with who they play week on week, and they probably know who's going to get relegated to a large degree, to be honest. So there's a safety net there for them. They can mix around with players knowing that they won't get relegated. Whereas the player or the team at the lower ebb, you can end up with a couple of hammerings. Now, Antrim, to be fair, have transitioned quite well over the last couple of years. Like they are holding their own without a doubt, and very impressed, to be honest, even this year with a lot of their results. There's only a couple of points within games and probably very close to winning them. So they're a bit different, but they're in a group that's, previously they've been in a group that hasn't been too bad, maybe more at their level as well. That has helped.
Michael, so we've talked about all the serious side of Offaly. What sort of fun did you have up there as well? You've good characters, Michael Dygan, and I'm sure maybe you got in a round of golf with Shane Lowry or a night out with him, no?
I didn't swing golf club over those 3 years, and that's no joke. You wouldn't have time. And COVID came in. COVID was tough. COVID took 2 years there, to be honest. Literally when I started when I took on the job in September, for example, and I started getting the back room and all that kind of work together, it was gone by March. So literally, it was gone by March. And then when it came back, then we had to forfeit our first game against Kildare in the championship because we got someone in the HSC side of things said we had 20 plus close contacts, which wasn't the case, and we had to forfeit. We had no team. So that was massively challenging that year, and it did drip into the next year as well. And thankfully, we hit the ground run a bit of luck as well, which is good. But we would have had coffee mornings. We got a coffee van one morning during COVID. We had the online quizzes. Funny enough, Tommy Welsh actually. I asked Tommy to introduce the '94 team and go through just who they are and that for the crack. That's all I said to him. Tommy had a video of him. He had a Sunday game going in the background. And he had about 15 minutes long of each player, who they were, their background, their family, the whole lot. And mighty crack, to be honest. And we quizzes, which are good crack as well. And we had a few drinks online, during the COVID phase. But it's really important to have that downtime. Jeez, if players are not enjoying it, what's the point to this whole thing? They need to enjoy it. You want them gelling together, being around each other more. And definitely, we'd always try to introduce nights out for players if we can balance the schedule. But the schedule my last year, we had 10 games in 13 weeks or something. So we're on the go, including Welsh Cup now. And obviously Welsh Cup games were massive for us at that stage as well. So you're constantly on the go, and you can't sustain that either.
And I presume you built up a great bond with some of these lads. It was probably a bit of a wrench to leave at the same time.
Oh yeah, 100%. Look, a lot of them boys are honest, good lads, and they do anything for you. Genuinely do anything for you. There's a good few of them who are similar to myself, kind of obsessed about developing themselves, getting better, getting stronger, and they'll eat up information. They want to know how to get better, and really good fellas, to be honest. And just whatever happened in Offaly over those years, you feel sorry for them. Them boys are still trying to build that culture, build that leadership, and thankfully Johnny Kelly is still building that now and continuing on that. And there's a huge chunk of them still there, and there's a young team there, but they need to stay together and they need to keep building and wait for that kind of golden crop that's coming through there at minor level. There is a strong crop coming through, and if they can hold this group at the moment at senior level, keep improving them, and then transition them boys in over the next 2, 3, 4 years, which will take that. You hope Offaly will be more consistent and stronger maybe.
Yeah, and a final question before we let you go, because I know you're starting work soon. How do you think Kilkenny will do this year as Derek Ling takes over from Brian Cody?
Yeah, look, it's hard to know, lads. I haven't got a magic ball. And look, Kilkenny won 3 Leinsters over the last 3 years. They got to 2 semi-finals and an All-Ireland. Like, God, they've really done well over the last number of years. And obviously we feel they could have maybe done a little bit more, funnily enough. But at the same time, they could have went south as well on numerous occasions. Like, so I think Derek is trying to find his feet, trying to find the team that's right for this year. And he needs to trial players in the league. And he's been doing that, which is great. Like, we had a poor performance and result against Tipperary. And, for me, I wouldn't have been panicking about that or anything. I think, and there was supporters panicking about it, like, very disheartened by it. But Derek is still trying. He's trying to, have a look at players that maybe haven't played or the last previous few years and trying to get that mix right. He's got a new coach. He's got a new S&C coach. Like, they're 2 really important people within your preparations. Like, so that's not going to just happen straight away. You compare that to Liam Cahill. Liam Cahill's coming into Tipperary with Mikey Bevins, his coach that he's been with for the last, I don't know how long, maybe it's 10 years. And they have their model, they have their template set up, like, if you get me, like, so that makes the transition much easier to implement your game plan. And I think Derek is still trying to find what's there. And he has highly experienced players over the age of 30 that he will need, whether they're starting or coming on in the dressing room, on the training field, like, so they are massively important to it. And obviously he's trying to just get the balance right.
Okay, well, look, brilliant to have you on this morning, Michael, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Cheers, lads. A1, good chat. Take care.
Okay, so just a reminder that Michael is going to be at our coaching clinic in Valley Rovers Saturday, County Cork, alongside Brick Walsh and Pat Ryan. You can get a link to the video, or to the tickets, I should say, in the video description. Not too far away from you, is it, Valley Rovers in Cork?
No, wouldn't be actually far from the home at all. They're actually, though, in a different division. So the way Cork was structured, like similar, I suppose, maybe to the way you were with Drum and Inch, even though they're kind of bordering you, you actually don't really play them much because they're in different divisions. So yeah, they'd be in a Shannon, be kind of the area. Actually, the guy playing for Dublin at the moment now, Chris O'Leary, is that'll be his club. So he's kind of an interesting kind of story. They've had different guys over the years. Obviously, playing between kind of football and hurling would be pretty strong joke,
Yeah, your mic is just rubbing off your shirt, your jumper there. That's I'll just go through the AIBGA hurling team of the year. So Stephen O'Keefe, he's in goals. I think it's his 3rd award. Killian Corcoran, Leaving Cert student. Himself, Joey Holden, Brian McGarry. Joey Holden was man of the match in the club final in 2015, and here he is now on the team of the year in 2023. Ryan McGarry, Kevin Malloy, Richie Reid and Dara Corcoran in the half back line, Conor Sheehan and Adrian Mullen, Owen Cody, TJ Reid and Pádraig Mahoney, and a full forward line of Conal Cunning, Colin Fennelly and Pat Fitzgerald. Funny, Patrick Fitzgerald only just makes his debut there in the past season, but he got man of the match in 2 out of the 3 Munster games where he scored 3-9. And then I think it was a couple of points from play against Ballyhale in the semi-final in his first huge club game at Croke Park.
Yeah, and I think the sense was last year when they won the All-Ireland, he was partaking in some of the kind of training sessions, even though he couldn't actually play. And he probably is an example, watching it recently, seeing the Joe Cannon Lake Gale and kind of reminded of those times when Portumna were coming through and the All-Ireland club final they played Newton Chandram, and how good he was then. Similar enough age, I think Noel McGrath and Lockmore Castleiney won a Munster. They're having these kind of teenage kind of prodigies at underage level. And then on balance, I think I'm in favour of the rule, but I guess it does kind of maybe hamper the kind of very talented player kind of making an immediate kind of step up. He's obviously an example at the moment. Fitzgerald probably delayed. Seeing the schools action last week in hurling, I was thinking from Claren Bridge's point of view, you imagine they would surely be thinking Aaron Island is kind of at a level. And I'm wary now we're kind of hyping him up, but he does seem like the next thing, doesn't he? Big thing when you kind of look at the kind of scores he's been putting up. I'm sure Kilcormac Cloughey, exactly the same last year with Adam Screeney, and there was loads of kind of tip minor examples, So I think in Ballygunner, they were kind of waiting. They would have liked to maybe put Fitzgerald in earlier, but then when they were able to, they saw the obviously impact he was able to make in that full forward line alongside Desi Hutchinson and Kevin Mahoney.
Yeah, so a bit of a nasty incident, as people would have known, in the past week in Dublin club hurling. So there was an alleged serious assault of an umpire last weekend. This was down in Sean Moore Park in Sandymount, which is only down the road from me, actually. And there's been a couple of statements already, and they're kind of conflicting statements between Naomh Fionn Barra and Clonagale. And for example, I think Naomh Fionn Barra they made some claims about the game being abandoned, and then Flanagan, they responded saying, to date, Nathan Barr has issued 2 separate statements in connection with this matter, one of which purports to be a commentary on certain aspects of the referee's report, which admits to address other significant matters contained in the report. Flanagan does not propose to offer a similar commentary, but for the avoidance of doubt, it strongly refutes the contents of the most recent Nathan Barr statement. The Ringsend Club said that they're fully cooperating with An Garda Síochána. Nathan Barr, they've talked about some of the one-sided media reports as well, and in terms of whether those people involved were club members. So that's all pretty nasty stuff there. Bad news for Mickey Hart with Sam Mulroy. He's hit with an injury and could be out for 12 weeks, whereas with Kerry, it's probably better. Well, mixed news, I should say. Paul Ganey and Gavin White are back, while Dara Roach and Stefan Okunbor, they've picked up knocks. And you've seen Kerry in the flesh recently.
Yeah, I saw them against Armagh recently. Just on the Mulroy thing, like a couple of years ago when someone, a cruciate injury used to be described as season ending or, a broken leg, it had to be something really, really kind of long term. The issue with the new kind of season structure, you definitely find maybe injuries that are kind of maybe seem less severe, but something like that can really, really kind of affect the guy. I suppose we've seen Cahill at Cork and Mulroy now in Louth in terms of the Division 2 football. We've talked about the kind of the Tipperary hurling ones as well that have kind of cropped up, but that's a huge blow for Louth. He's been absolutely brilliant the last couple of years. Free taker, getting goals, impacting scores from play as well. Now, pretty impressive the fact that he went off last week and they still managed to, I suppose not get, kind of preserve their winning position, and they weren't kind of affected too much. I think Tommy Durnan was really, really good and Conor Grimes, but you'd have to think in the kind of longer term. Well, they're obviously in a very, very good position now, you imagine, in Division 2 to kind of stay in the Sam Maguire race, looking further ahead, Leinster Championship, 23rd of August against Westmeath, and whatever way their season unfolds from there, it's going to be pretty, pretty difficult for him to kind of get back into the frame. And just a county like that, it's the most obvious thing, given, I suppose, it is the smallest county in Ireland, but teams like that, that's the issue, just the depth of them, whereas a bigger county may be able to absorb it to some extent. It's just a huge blow for Louth to lose someone like him now for the next few months. Every situation is kind of interesting, and I don't know if you find this is kind of cropping up a bit when you look at Dublin as well. The kind of whole thing of depth, that even on the top level, when you take away that kind of layer, like Kerry at the moment now, there seems a big issue basically who's going to be midfield alongside Jack Barry, and basically they're hoping Jack Barry will kind of remain fit enough that nothing kind of happens to him. You saw Dublin last week, but I suppose maybe Dublin is a bit of an outlier. I think it's really becoming clear now that around that time, around 2017-18, the substitute benches they had, similar to when Michael was involved with Kilkenny, the Kilkenny hurling subs they have, I don't know, did we fully appreciate that we were seeing something kind of really special, and I'm not sure it's going to be easily replicated. I don't know if Fitzmaurice had a line in his column on Monday talking about when they drew against them in 17 or 18, it was the time Kerry or Dublin were going on the unbeaten run, and Mannion got the point in the last minute, I think, to draw down in Tralee. But he basically listed off the subs that they brought on that day. I think it was McMenamin, Flynn, Brogan, Mannion, 2 others, but I think they were all-star winners as well. And he just compared it to, and it's no slight on the kind of guys involved now, but it's just the levels of experience just aren't kind of there, So for a lot of teams, I think depth is maybe squad options are becoming an issue now. And we'll see later on this summer with this new All-Ireland system how much panels are going to be tested in that respect.
Yeah, Dean Rock was talking about diving in the GA this week, and he was saying it's definitely crept into the game. It's not something we do. Maybe we're too honest or too naive. I don't know, but it's certain. I mean, Dublin suggesting that they're too naive. I mean, pull the other one. Come on.
The end of this, I don't know, but the end of the 2017 final was what sprung to mind there with David Clark size up that kick out,
I mean, was he able to keep a straight face when he made that comment? Anyway, but he said, but it's certainly becoming a problem in Gaelic football. I think simulation is becoming a problem in both codes. You see the amount of hurlers that are going into contact and they just throw their arms up in the air straight away. I'm being pulled back. And the more that referees just say, on you go, and do them for steps because they just stop up before it's a proper foul, I think the better. We'll go straight into the previews of matches this weekend. So we'll start off with Clare against Galway. So that's a meeting of 2 former hurlers of the year on the sideline, I suppose, Brian Lohan and Henry Shefflin. And just in terms of the tables coming into this game, Clare are third in the group. They've got 2 wins from 3 games. They were beaten, of course, in one of the games by, who beat them again? Limerick. Limerick can beat them well, but they've won their other 2 games.
That was like such a, having been at that game, in person, it was absolutely baffling afterwards to figure out that how was there only 6 points in this game. Like, now, it was basically Aidan McCarthy and David really just kind of caught fire in the last 10 minutes between them. But for so long in that game, until about 55, 56 minutes, like, Limerick were just completely cruising, you know?
Yeah, they absolutely are. So how would you see this game going?
I suppose, like, with a lot of these things, like, it's just very, very kind of difficult to kind of assess a lot of teams at the moment. Trying to get a read on them. I mean, I'm talking there, I suppose, about how Clare were against Limerick and kind of how poor they were and how they kind of look for a response. And obviously Brian Lohan got it in kind of spades the next day down in Wexford, and I don't think many people would have kind of seen the scale of that. Like, so, like, you know, they've had two really, really heavy wins in terms of what beat Westmeath by 25 points, and you're beating Wexford by 22. So kind of scoring difference wise, it's obviously been pretty impressive. But, you know, I think it's the first kind of big game at home they've had this year, so I think there might be an element of that from their fan base point of view, because I mean, you know, with kind of respect to Westmeath in terms of kind of one of the top counties kind of coming to Ennis, and kind of one that's really going to kind of, I suppose, get the locals kind of going. You know, I think there will be an element of kind of targeting from that point of view. Galway, from their point, I know what you thought. Like, it was really just contrasting fortunes, wasn't it, against Limerick? Like, you know, like, they just had too much ground to make up, and when they did kind of make a spurt towards the end, you know, they are trying a lot of players at the moment. Some guys, I suppose Tom Monaghan is maybe becoming a regular now, really, and Kevin Cooney, I think, has been kind of showing up well as well. But I think the main thing, I think we're getting to, you know, 11th, 12th of March this weekend is now the stage, just over a month out from the start of the championship. Are we going to start seeing guys maybe a bit more settled 15s? I think it'll be more interesting to see what sort of, and you know, whatever teams are on Thursday or Friday night, you can kind of take how much you're actually going to invest faith in them is probably questionable, you know. But when you actually see how the teams actually start on Saturday and Sunday, I don't know what you think, but I think maybe this is the weekend we can start to think, okay, there's a bit more kind of a shape coming into the equation here, because we have round 5 next weekend for St. Patrick's Day weekend. Then we have into the league semi-finals. We don't know who will be involved in that, so not all managers can obviously guarantee that they're going to have another game after the 19th of March. So I wonder, will we start to get to see maybe a little bit more insight into managerial thinking with the championship in mind, in terms of positional stuff for some counties. Might have, you know, I suppose we talked about kind of defensive issues for Cork before, maybe Tipperary with a couple of the injuries, kind of how they're shaping, or the kind of Brian O'Mara, Garrod O'Connor, you know, where they're kind of thinking of positioning them. So I think that would be, and looking at Clare and Galway in particular, maybe that would be quite interesting this weekend.
Yeah, Paul Flanagan, cornerback for Clare, he was asked this week about the gap between league and championship, and he goes, well, I think it's pretty straightforward in that you have your last 2 league games coming now, and you want to deliver a performance there to be able to win, and then you see after that, if you're into a league semi-final, I think maybe a gap of 3 weeks would probably be fair. I think any more than that, and you'll probably end up going back to what it was a few years ago, another block of a mini pre-season. I don't think anyone really wants that, and I suppose we kind of touched to some degree on that already with Michael Fennelly. I wonder how many of the St. Thomas's lads will be seen this weekend as well. Generally, it's a pretty good game between Clare and Galway. Westmeath against Limerick, I don't think anyone's expecting an absolute cracker here. I'd imagine Limerick will be much changed. So far, their form this year has seen them win 2 out of 3 games. And to be honest, when they had their frontliners out against your Cork team, they definitely did look the stronger of the 2 teams. And, you know, as they ran the bench, is it fair to say that that's when Cork started to come back into the game? So to me, Limerick are in very rude health. Obviously, Kyle Hayes is suspended, but maybe they would have rested him for this anyway. But do you see any sense that Limerick aren't the same team again this year?
No, I don't think so. And I think this time last year, we were all trying to maybe decipher, maybe there were signs of slippage. Maybe there were signs of them kind of maybe just coming back to the pack a little bit. I think you could argue that maybe did happen last year with the scale of the wins that they had. I think they were really, really, truly tested for last year's All-Ireland win, which maybe didn't happen to the same extent through no fault of their own, and maybe it was sign of their dominance in some of the other seasons. But I think the squad has just been embellished a little bit, you know, 4 or 5 different options now. I know guys have been on the fringes the last couple of years, but looking at, you know, Fergal O'Connor, Adam English, Colin Coughlin, Cahill O'Neill's been out injured. You know, as Kylie said, that was kind of tough on him. You literally pick up a calf injury and you miss out on a Fitzgibbon Cup win. With UL, Donnacha O'Donnell is a guy who's with the under-20s, had a good campaign with Monaleen, and you know, I wouldn't have maybe thought that maybe that was going to be something that was going to kind of get him into the shop window. But I do know it's Paul Kinnock's club, Monaleen, and he was while Owen Bazan was obviously the coach, was hugely successful with them this year. I think they did have Connacht in on a few occasions. He had a lot of success with the club in football, and obviously, why wouldn't you utilise someone like that to try and give you a hand when you're in that kind of a club campaign? So I think that probably didn't hurt his chances, in terms of he's obviously a direct line to Kylie then, in terms of kind of getting this guy in, and he seems to be kind of coming on nearly every game and kind of getting a point or two.
Doing well.
Kieran Barry is another one. So it'll be interesting to see, are we going to see Dimmer Burns back soon? These press invites that we get, I know, did you see yesterday, but he's up for interview, I think the week after next at the launch of the Fela. So obviously back in the country, back in the kind of the Limerick hurling setup now, and this might be a game that they're kind of looking to kind of bring him back into it. But yeah, overall, I think it's kind of very, very positive for them. So the Aaron Galan, his availability is probably the one thing that is the probably question mark about it. And just the knock-on effect for that for the team will be two issues. I think the goal scoring threat will be one. 1 goal from 3 games so far. That was a brilliant goal created by Adam English's run against Clare at the end of the game. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they had a shot, did they, against Galway? I can't recall. Maybe a clear-cut kind of chance. So, Galan does kind of offer that. And then I just wonder about kind of the free taking. Dave Reedy's taking some, Mike Coolin's taking one. So you'll obviously have Burns back now in terms of the kind of ones from kind of midfield, half back line, but just wonder about that. But maybe it's a bit like when Dublin were at their top in the football. Are you kind of looking for flaws that maybe aren't actually readily apparent,
Yeah, I think you are, because they just seem like a machine that doesn't really have any sort of a weak link. Westmeath, they've lost all 3 games to date, but I mean, they have a minus 42 scoring difference, but a lot of that came against Clare, and they were relatively competitive against both Wexford and Cork. I just saw it was an interesting column this week from Martin Breheny, and it just starts out like the following, and he's obviously talking about Westmeath against Limerick, and he goes, "Hi there, Limerick hurlers. Hope you're finding balmy Portugal to your liking this week. Probably not as hot as Florida and the Bahamas, where you enjoyed a lavish holiday in January, but a whole lot warmer than here right now. You're on a training week, getting away from the home routine and working like full-time professionals as part of the foundation work for the All-Ireland 4-in-a-row attempt. You'll be back for the weekend, all refreshed and ready to play Westmeath and Mullingar on Sunday. They will have shivered their way through training this week, and having lost their first 3 games by an average of 14 points, it would have been higher had Cork fielded their strongest team in the last round. They know they're heading for a relegation playoff." It kind of does sum up the difference between the haves and the have-nots.
It does, yeah. I guess this has always kind of been there, and maybe I think it was more of an issue we were focusing on football. I think the last couple of years, I think this happens when one side is truly dominant, and I know what you, but I think it is interesting how it's completely flipped now. That it does seem it's very, very hard to see anyone make a case that Limerick aren't favourites and won't win the Lee McCarthy at the moment this year as we're assessing it. Whereas you try to make a corresponding case in football. 2 of us could throw teams at each other now, and I'd say we can both pick holes in the other's argument. It just seems far, far more open. Like you mentioned, the point, I suppose, kind of being a machine. The resources argument kind of is, I suppose, being kind of put into it, but they have obviously kind of organised themselves very, very well. And there is obviously a lot of merit to these camps. Like, you see any team that's won the All-Ireland, you looked at Liam Sheedy's Lakewood Gale was on last week. He was talking about kind of actually it was his brother talking about the bond that existed in the team. I don't see that line, John Sheedy, and he said, he took me to loads of places. He even took me to Mexico. He was basically going on about kind of what that kind of 2019 team, and I think Tip have used Portugal as well, for these kind of training camps. And like Kylie made the point last week, basically going on about just the amount of, similar to what Michael was talking about earlier, just the contact hours. It's not even the volume of sessions that they actually do. You probably might want to do it every week, and kind of, as he kind of said about the comparison with the Sydney Swans team in a professional environment, you don't want to be kind of stuck in each other's pockets 24/7. But I think for that week, it is very, very useful. I suppose if you have the capacity to do it and the wherewithal, you're obviously going to try and exploit it. And if the kind of schedule allows,
How are you feeling about Cork so far this year? Do you think there's some of the victories that you've had this year because of the likes of Limerick rolling the bench a nice bit and not knowing what teams are really trying to get out of the league? How do you feel Pat Ryan is doing, and how much can you believe in what you're seeing right now?
I think he's been a solid start. I don't think there's anything, I think he'd be a very, very pragmatic man. I think he'd realise the gap that exists. I don't think he'd be getting carried away with something like the Limerick win. But at the same time, I think if a county is trying to develop and trying to get up to the top, I think given the amount of defeats they've had, and like obviously the 2021 All-Ireland final is the one that kind of stands out above all else, but even the way the last year's championship started, they've suffered some really, really bad defeats since 2018 at the hands of Limerick. So I think at a certain stage, you just need to kind of reverse that cycle. You know, even something as simple as winning, they beat them in a Munster pre-season league game this year, and even more experimental teams on both sides than that day. I don't think we can kind of quite measure it. It's kind of a bit of an intangible, but I think there is a bit of a 1 or 2% if you start beating a side and if you just claim that victory in maybe a similar way to where Derry footballers last weekend against Dublin. I just think the need is greater for one side to try and beat the other, and you can put all the caveats you want in afterwards, and they're obviously very justifiable ones in terms of running the bench, in terms of personnel and all that. But I did think that was a kind of an important game for them to win. When they beat Galway, then I think it was an aspect of, I think certain players, if you look at the three main scorers in that game, like Conor Lehan wasn't involved for a year in 2021, came back last year, did some very good things, then didn't have a very good game then in the All-Ireland quarter-final against Galway. But they seem to be kind of investing a lot of faith in him and seem to be kind of trusting him. Similarly, Declan Dalton has been kind of in and out of panels. They seem to be kind of putting a good bit of time with him, and Sean Toomey is probably another one. So of those three, I can't think off the top of my head what the cumulative score that they got, but it was pretty substantial in that game against Galway. It'll be interesting to see where they kind of fit into the championship setup. So I suppose that's a group of players that have been there already and have had exposure to this level. And maybe Ryan is trying to develop them a bit more. And then I suppose, look, the main aspect, and the same way that I'm looking what Cahill is doing in Tipperary and Derek Ling is Kilkenny, is that how many of his under 20 or under 21 winners is he looking to fast track into it? Say Kieran Joyce was obviously there already as most people would have said, the centre back, but Owen Downey at the full back now, that is probably kind of one of the more interesting ones. Then other guys like, you know, Ryan O'Sullivan, Tommy O'Connell, like Conor Callahan's a pretty interesting one, just simply of his background. I mean, like basically his club is Drumtariff, which would be, you know, real football country, kind of near the Kerry border. I think he's the first person from the clubs that played hurling championship for Cork. He definitely, he captained him to one of the under 20 wins. But it's just hasn't made the immediate step up that some of the other guys have. So it's taken him a little bit longer to kind of get up, but he seems to have got a good sustained run of games at cornerback. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not speaking for Pat Ryan, but I wonder, is it a case that sometimes you're looking in, you've worked with a guy on the 20 level, you think you have the ability to get something out of him, and then if you get the chance at senior, then you're going to kind of invest the faith in him, you know? So I think things are coming along well for them so far, but the challenges ahead are huge. Not even getting to Limerick's level. I think that's another challenge again for everyone going. I think just getting out of Munster in the top three is a big thing. And even the Watford example last year aside, I still think it would be a good thing for Cork to go hard at the league and try and win it, given the way it falls for them, that they had that 3-week break that Paul Flanagan spoke about. If the results panned out, even just getting to the league final, I think again will be something that they can attack, you know.
Yeah, no league title for Cork in 25 years. Like, one of the big challenges as well is injury for Alan Connolly, for obviously Mark Coleman's going to be out for most likely the entire year. Davy Fitzgibbon, he's had an injury as well. I wonder, do you see both Conor Lehan and Patrick Horgan starting throughout the championship?
I think they can, yeah. The makeup of the team around them then could be interesting, in the sense that if you have kind of Brian Roach there, maybe as
he's been very good, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, he's really impressive. He's a very versatile player, you know. So maybe if you have him in the kind of half forward line, he can do kind of more of that kind of retreating work and that. On the injury front, though, I suppose that is a serious obstacle if all of them don't come back. I'd put Robbie O'Flynn into that bracket as well, with Fitzgibbon and Coleman. I think the three of them in different ways. The other two probably get more of the plaudits because, you know, they came onto the team straight away in kind of 2017, 18. Both have been all-stars, but I think over the last 18 months, I think O'Flynn has really proved his worth. And I think even in the first game against Limerick, you know, it was his goal that really kind of propelled that comeback that night. And he just offers the patient side. And I think he's a brilliant foil for Horgan, that they can kind of play off each other well and bring different kind of elements to it. So they're being a bit cagey as the guys. Like, no one's been ruled in or out for the season. Even Coleman hasn't quite been ruled out for the season yet. I wonder, does that mean they do think there's still a little bit of hope? Maybe that things can kind of work out for them. But at this stage, for the first game on the 30th of April, which is against Tip and then they're playing against Waterford in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and then they play Tip the week after. It'll be very interesting to see of those three how many of them are actually available to play any part in those two games.
Yeah, so this weekend they'll welcome Wexford, and Darragh Egan was talking about the team after getting hammered, like beaten around the place by Clare. Clare scored 625 to 118 in that game. He goes, ultimately we have to look at players and give lads game time to see if they can cut it at this level. Some did and some didn't, and that's the reality. So he wouldn't have had the likes of Lee Chin, Rory O'Connor, Matthew O'Hanlon. There's talk of whether Paddy Foley will be back this year, but to be fair, like some of those players who are coming in, they have a better opportunity of hitting the ground running if they have all those big name players available. And he goes, also last year, we have a good number of weeks to get sorted. I suppose last year we shipped heavy beatings in the Walsh Cup and the league semi-final against Watford, and we recovered well from it. So that's the kind of response we're looking for again this year. So I think that could actually be quite a good game this weekend. Tipperary are going to be against Watford at home this weekend. A couple of comments coming in, a little bit of sneeriness to them. Zed Leplin says, can't wait for Tipperary to bang in 4 goals a game regularly. Only team that could potentially stop Limerick. No need for Tip to put out a good team this week, says Sean O'Sullivan. Tip are back, so should win handy. You could be right, Zed. So far, all Tip have been for Limerick is target practice and trying young lads, but anything is possible. There's talk of Davy looking to give Tip a good scalding this weekend, says TB Street. So where do you fall on when it comes to this game?
I think it's probably the most interesting hurling game of the weekend. For different elements to it, like straight up, like the Liam Cahill factor is pretty fascinating, you know. Like aside from the fact that he's back involved at Tipperary, and that's the, you know, maybe a bit delayed more than Tipperary fans kind of wanted, him kind of getting the senior job after all the success he'd had at various underage levels, how well he kind of knows the Watford players. I'm not sure off the top of my head when these are playing each other in championship, but it will be kind of an interesting one to kind of see in terms of kind of, I suppose, gauging the kind of relationship between the counties.
I'll ask you a question. When did Tipperary last beat Waterford in a league or championship match?
It's a loss last year. Lost the Ireland quarterfinal 2021. Didn't play each other 2020, did they? 19? I think
it was 2020, so it was a league match in let me just check the date, March the 1st in 2020. And do you want to know who was man of the match that day? It's obviously, I'll say it with a tinge of sadness, Dylan Quirk scored 5 points from play. Right. He was absolutely brilliant that day. But it just kind of tells you that we're talking about 3 years, I think 5 competitive games in a row that Tipperary have come up short against Waterford. At the moment, Waterford have Tip's numbers, so Tipperary, like, it's quite important for a lot of reasons. Number one, Liam Cahill wants to get a victory. He doesn't want to lose, and, you know, the team that he's no longer with, you know, it didn't end perfectly. Let's call a spade a spade. Yeah. But also, Tipperary don't want to go in feeling very much like a team that's second best to Watford based on all these results over the last few years.
Yeah, well, listen, absolutely, you're bang on there. I mean, that's another element, like the point I was making as regards the Cork Limerick thing. You know, psychologically at a certain point, you need to. I mean, that wasn't a record I was as aware of. Just looking actually at the last game in the Munster round robin is Tip Waterford the 28th of May in Thurles. So if you lost on Saturday night and then, like, say you were going into the last round and Tipperary needed something from it, you know, you don't want that kind of little maybe seed of doubt. Maybe it might even be in the players and it won't be spoken about, but in the crowd there might be that little edginess and a bit of anxiety about it, you know. So that is another aspect to it. Makeup of the teams, as I said, in terms of, you know, like Brian O'Mara, Gerard O'Connor on one side, the two Patrick Fitzgeralds, Ruben O'Halloran, kind of these kind of guys on the other side. And I'd say Davy is kind of looking forward to it in terms of he kind of had said he was pretty disappointed. I think he's quite fairly average, was not the word he used about the Antrim performance the last day. I think that was aspects of the Dublin game. I think he was pretty happy with his team's kind of resilience in kind of getting back for a draw that game, but the fact that they didn't, considering the right cards, but the fact that they didn't win at home in Dungarvan, again, this won't be an issue for them come championship playing there, but it doesn't seem like either their 2 matches there so far in terms of performance-wise have been very satisfactory for them, you know, even though they haven't lost either of them, but I think that they'll be kind of looking forward to kind of playing, and that's another aspect of it. Like, it's strange, like for an away game for them, I think he'll be quite delighted that it's worked out this year in the league that they're away to Tipperary, so that they can actually play them in Semple Stadium and get used to a venue where, like, let's face it, they're playing, I'm looking here, 23rd of April, they're playing Limerick in Semple Stadium. They play Clare there on the 13th of May, and then they have their last game. So 3 of their 4 months of championship games are going to be at the venue. So even that thing alone might be kind of a part of it. And the other one we obviously throw out is like, not just Liam Cahill going up against the Watford angle, obviously Owen Kelly going up against Tipperary as well, So like,
and Tony Brown going up.
Exactly, yeah. Sorry, so like there's all those kind of aspects to it. It's the only televised game on, I think on Saturday, 7:15 Saturday night. So I think it's pretty interesting for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, Watford beat Tip by 10 points in the league last year. That was quite the hammering, and 4 points in the Munster Championship. And Tip won't have the likes of Cahill Barrett available for a while. And nailing down Desi Hutchinson, for example, has been a big one the last few years. So will Conor McCarthy or Johnny Ryan get an opportunity to mark him? Maybe Brian O'Meara.
That's a good test now, isn't it? Like you're really getting thrown in there for whatever. Maybe if you've been kind of eased into it in terms of, like, it's the first real senior season for both, isn't it? I know they've been kind of maybe I played preseason games before or whatever, but yeah, this is a good step up now for them in terms of playing. If you're going up against someone like Hutchinson.
What do you think the situation is with Aston Gleason so far? Because he's been used for a combined 69 minutes so far, plus injury time. So it's obviously a little bit more. But basically, he's come off the bench every game, give or take, with 20 minutes to go. He's actually the top scorer for Watford, despite that. He has 15 points, 4 of those from play. The next is Stephen Bennett, who has 2-7, all from placed balls. So straight away, you're getting a picture there of a team that's not exactly free scoring up front. Now, Mikey Kiley was red carded after 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever, and then suspended for the next game. He scored 4-1 in that Fitzgibbon Cup final. So obviously he's potentially a big scorer, and obviously Desi as well. But what do you make of the Aston Gleason situation? What sort of message has been sent, if any at all, that he hasn't started any of these games?
I'm not sure. Well, I suppose when we don't know when we're inside not inside the camp, I'm not really sure. Is it a case of a message? I mean, I go back to the thing I said about now in round 4, getting a kind of a clearer idea of kind of teams makeup and all that. I mean, that 4-game window between 23rd of April and 28th of May, like, that's when you're going to need Aston Gleason firing from a Watford aspect, I can't see a situation where they're going to be able to kind of put their best foot forward without him in their team. Where Davy will look to employ him will be kind of interesting. He does bring obviously a huge range of skills. There is various debates about his best positioning and what way kind of he will try to exploit that. But if you look at the overhaul in their team, let alone the 2017 All-Ireland, but even the 2020 All-Ireland team, I think they do need kind of someone like him, obviously, kind of to the fore. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they start him now Saturday night and if they kind of go for it that way. I mean, at the moment, looking at the table, you think it's kind of between themselves, Tip, Water for Kilkenny for those 2 spots. Dublin probably are going to need a win on Sunday, given that they're 3 points at the moment. You think if they lose to Kilkenny on Sunday, they probably aren't going to be in the reckoning for the 2 spots from Group B. So, I mean, if Watford have designs on reaching the league knockout stages, and I don't know how you manipulate this as a manager, like, do you start thinking we want to pull the handbrake up here, and we kind of want to just ease off a little bit. But I would be very, very surprised if he's not a central part of their team and plans going forward. So I think maybe it might be just something as simple as kind of easing him back into it as the season has progressed,
Yeah, it's funny enough that in this Division 1 Group B of Tipperary, Watford, Kilkenny, Dublin, Antrim, Laois, that Darren Gleeson is the only manager here who's not in his first season. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. I suppose both Davy Fitz, all of these managers potentially, the 5 of the 6 that haven't had a season with these teams previously, they probably wouldn't mind having that league semi-final, just have a bit more kind of, I suppose, chance to road test their options heading into the championship.
Yeah, that's true. Like, if you look at it from, it'd be 3 games in a row then, wouldn't it? So yeah, I think the semi-finals are down for Saturday the 25th. So you'll have a game this weekend, you'll have a game Patrick's Day weekend, and then you'll have the league semi-final the 25th of May. And maybe the 2 happiest managers might be the 2 managers that reach the league semi-final and then lose it. And then you have, like, because there's a 2-week break between the league semi-finals and final, like, if you lose the league semi-final, you have nearly a month then block of work to probably get a good base. I know there's debate what's better, 3 to 4 weeks. I think the consensus, as much as you can talk to people, it seems to be 3, is it? You've kind of 1 week to recover, 1 week to kind of go flat out hard work before a match, and then kind of the last week kind of maybe tapering off and kind of building up to the game, So yeah, I think maybe there could be a bit of a prize in a carrot there.
Yeah, is the word taper off used anywhere else better than in GA?
I'm trying to think of any other sport you will be. I feel like it'll be kind of a Rugby World Cup thing ahead of the warm-ups or something like that. There's something about tapering off, and there's probably some other word that I'm unfamiliar with in rugby.
But I don't know if you can taper off while you're trying to get to the emotional pitch in rugby. So, that's a hard one to juggle. Adrian McGrath, he's coming for you here. He goes, Cork supporters will make it very hard for any manager to pick Declan Dalton, Brian Roach and Sean Toomey over time. They never had much value in Timmy McCarthy or Pat Cronin. They like their nippy point from the sideline, lads. Is that true?
Well, they value these guys after they're gone, Like, I think Timmy McCarthy, his stock rose more and more when he was retired, and people kind of then maybe started to appreciate kind of what they had to offer. I would argue that now there is a realization, and the way hurling has gone, that these guys are probably valued a fair bit more for kind of what they bring to the table. I mean, you take someone like Garrod Hegarty, I think he's kind of celebrated amongst Limerick supporters for the kind of work he does, and kind of, the covering runs back into the defence as much as he's getting up the other end, and he's scoring, these sensational goals and points and all that. I mean, look at Tipperary, like, is Bonner Maher the most kind of collectively beloved forward for all the team since 2010, all the exploits of, like, Kelly, Callan, McGrath, all this, like, the kind of the mix of stuff that Bonner Maher was bringing to it. And every time he's had a serious injury setback, hasn't it been kind of bemoaned that Tipperary maybe don't have that kind of range of skills to offer. So maybe in the current game, there is a kind of a realization that's needed. And I think in Cork, there has been this aspect that there is, Pat Ryan has talked about this, that there is the charge level at them not as aerially dominant, and that the work hasn't been at the level that it needs to get to. And they are two things he has said that he's kind of looking to work on. So with that in mind, the personnel that he's selecting will be interesting.
Yeah, just a reminder, we've got the coaching clinic coming up this weekend. Valley Rovers, County Cork, Michael Fennelly, Brick Walsh and Pat Ryan, they'll all be there. Michael Fennelly was on at the top of the show, so you can get a link to the tickets at the video description. Also, we've started our live Club GA fundraisers. We'll have celebrity guests, quiz, fun challenges, local legends. The first one's going to be in Rowan Moore, County Waterford soon. So email events@ourgame.ie if you'd like us to bring a show to you to help get your fund sorted for the year. Antrim against Laois this weekend at Corrigan Park. It's a bit of a de facto relegation semi-final. Let's call a spade a spade. Westmeath are probably going to finish bottom of Division 1A. So between Antrim and Laois now, it looks like it's most likely one of the two of those. It's almost certainly one of the two of those who's going to be in the other side of the final of the relegation. How do you see this one going? It's a battle of two Tipperary men, actually, Willie Maher and Darren Gleason.
It is. I think you'd probably have to be favouring Antrim in advance, wouldn't you, looking at it?
Just the way they're going, yeah.
Even like the home advantage would be one thing. But yeah, I mean, like, even just one simple stat. Okay, both teams have lost their 3 games to date, but Laois's scoring difference is -45, Antrim's is -17. And you look at the way, like, they lose to Kilkenny by 6 points. Then they obviously lost to Watford for the last day by 8, but there was kind of probably a bit tighter. And then lost to Dublin by 3. And look, there's no kind of... Darren Gleason was pretty annoyed, it seemed, after the Dublin game that they didn't manage to get something out of that. Maybe of the 3, that was the one that they probably came closest to, but they've obviously performed very credibly in those games. They've obviously had, likes of McManus and these kind of guys established, but they've probably got a bit of a kick of how well Dunloy played in the All-Ireland Club final. But, like, say, if you're a Dunloy player, you've had that defeat, you've had these 3 league defeats, you've had a lot of kind of consistent performances, but I think the pressure will probably be on them now it's not a performance now, it's just simply a results basis now in terms of getting something out of the game up there. Whereas, like, from Laois's point of view, Watford game probably was a lot of good facets for a lot of good aspects to that for long stages. But obviously the fact that Cahill was sent off early, that obviously did frame the kind of way that outcome was, and then conceded 34 points the last day against Kilkenny. So I think there's been a consistency to Antrim's performances, pretty maybe thankless task at times, in trying to kind of bridge that gap. And I think from their point of view, they really just want to sustain that now, as they're heading into pretty big season for them in terms of Leinster Championship. Stuff like there is definitely a glamour element to it. Like, when you look at the fact that they're going to be hosting Kilkenny, for example, in one of the games, and what I imagine locally, how much excitement that's going to drum up. The thought of, like, if you TJ Reid back or whatever, and you've won Cody, Porrick Walsh, all these kind of big names that they're actually going to be playing them. They're going to be in Corrigan Park for that game. So I think relegation will be a pretty significant setback for them if they were heading into that, or even get the relegation final. So I think this is definitely a pretty big one for them.
Yeah, and like Antrim really do have some classy hurlers. I mean, I love watching the likes of James McNaughton, Keelan Malloy, Conal Cunning is classy. There's an awful lot of other players that I haven't even mentioned there. And yeah, a red card for Owen Campbell against Watford, that probably scuppered them a little bit. But even so, they kept very, very tight with Watford throughout that game. The one thing I'd say about Laois, and again, they played some excellent hurling against Watford when Watford were down to 14 men, but then they were pushing their luck in terms of red card. When it finally did come, it was maybe a little bit unfortunate, but they were pushing their luck and they sort of fell apart a little bit from there. But one thing I would say is a couple of years ago, when their backs were against the wall and it was a relegation playoff to go down to the Joe McDonagh Cup at Parnell Park, they hurled Antrim off the field for most of the game. Now, it got pretty tight late on. I think Sean Elliott came off the bench and scored a goal that day, maybe set up one as well. But Laois have shown before when their backs are to the wall, they can have that answer against Antrim. Now, after the game against Kilkenny, when they conceded those 34 points, Willie Maher said, I'm absolutely disgusted with the first half. And we let the lads know that at half-time, when you're playing Kilkenny or any of the top counties, you have to go at them. And sure, we didn't lay a glove in the first half. The second half was a bit more decent. But look, the game was over. We did something positive in the second half, but it made no impact on the result. Gleason said after the result of Watford, we don't do moral victories, but I'm immensely proud of them and the effort today. So there's a fairly different tone between the two. So get your comments in. Let us know who you think will win that game. Now, Kilkenny against Dublin this weekend, Nolan Park. Now, generally, that's been a bit of a graveyard for Dublin teams over the years. I think it's basically up to some of the experienced players in the forward line for Dublin to really kind of step up and provide a foil for Donald Burke. I mean, Danny Sutcliffe's going to start having hit the ground running. Keane Boland, he has been very good, but was quiet against Tip for long spells. Fergal Whiteley going to need a little bit more out of him. And then they're going to have to hope that the likes of maybe Ronan Hayes, and I think Keane O'Sullivan is out for a while, but it's in that forward line where Dublin are definitely kind of coming up a little bit short.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a time of transition in terms of kind of some established names kind of have moved on or just not available for different reasons. You have a new management team in Donoghue, and Francis Ford and all that, so there is going to be a bit of a kind of a grace period. I think there's going to be a bit of a trust in there that they are kind of building something, and they have given games to kind of younger players. But yeah, I think this is kind of going to test them. I mean, you saw the Tipperary game from the outset. It looked like there was kind of a lot of good aspects to that. Maybe until the second goal, it was really kind of, obviously Donald Burke an absolute superb game that night, shooting the lights out, but it was kind of up for grabs. Getting the draw down in Watford was a good result, but the fact that they had the extra personnel, I suppose, not being able to close it out was probably a bit of an issue. And O'Sullivan obviously scoring 2 goals in that game, a bit of a disappointment for them. Probably then weren't as convincing against Antrim as maybe people kind of thought. But I think it'll be a good test for them. I mean, then they're at Hunt Laois in kind of the last game. I don't probably see them at this stage that they're going to make the league semi-finals. So I think the way the results will pan out. So this is probably a pretty big 2 weeks for them. Maybe in terms of kind of their last run of games before you're looking then at a Leinster Championship day starting off.
Yeah, it's TJ Reid. He's admitted that he's unlikely to see any action with Kilkenny in the league this year. Obviously, he had a very long season with Ballyhale Shamrocks, and he goes, I'm back on the field next week. If things are okay and the niggles are gone, we'll probably have a chat then to see about availability. I'm on a strength and conditioning block right now. I'm working with the physios and the strength and conditioning coaches because of a few niggles that I've played with through the whole club championship again. This is my 5th week off the field. I'm back on the field then taking part in the field-based exercises. Derek Ling has been great as well. I had a newborn baby and I had a week or 2 there, as well as time to spend with the family, which is very respectful. I'm back in the gym doing 4 or 5 sessions a week. I don't think I've had your thoughts on Kilkenny so far this year. What sort of direction do you think they're moving in? It's a big transitionary period. Some players have moved to Australia. Other players are looking to step up, and obviously a new manager in.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for a team that, when a team goes so close in the All-Ireland final, losing against a team like Limerick, you don't probably see maybe as much change. Like I'm thinking, again, I mentioned this program a couple of times just because it's fresh in my mind. I haven't seen it. I mentioned the Laker Gale. When you just seeing the way Liam Sheedy last week was talking about when they lost the Ireland semi-final in 2008, it was about coming back bigger and stronger for 2009. And then the same when they lost that final in 2009, it was coming back for 2010. And, last year's All-Ireland final did have that epic feel to it. The absolute dominant side being pushed to their absolute limit by an opponent, by a challenger. but it hasn't been as straightforward for Kilkenny to kind of regroup and kind of go along those lines again, because obviously the personnel changes on the pitch and on the sideline. I think Ling was pretty unhappy with aspects of their performance against Tip, particularly in the first half. I think the kind of ground they made up in the second half seemed to have kind of pleased them. Billy Drennan is obviously one that he's kind of fast-tracked into it. And I think there is an element of, I just think over the last couple of years when I've kind of looked at Kilkenny forward line, it feels like it's very, very Ballyhale heavy in terms of kind of looking for inspiration and influence. There's no doubt, obviously, age profile-wise, it's very favourable for Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen, but obviously TJ is irreplaceable. But I mean, the fact that he's still going, he's 36 this year, I think, isn't he? And his influence, doesn't show any signs of waning in terms of when you see what he's been doing with the club, work over the winter and the summer last year with Kilkenny. But I wonder, it's just trying to get another aspect. And there's a couple of guys, there's 4 or 5 names of theirs that have been kind of in and out of the team who will kind of pin down a starting berth this year. Is Drennan one that's going to kind of come in and maybe kind of give them that extra little bit of an edge? And then I'm obviously trying to think who's gone travelling. Michael Kerry, Conor Brown are kind of the two.
Is James Maher gone as well?
I think so, yeah. So that's kind of another kind of maybe aspect to kind of look into. Trying to gauge him, obviously in a group with Dublin, Antrim and Laois, maybe it's a little bit more on paper, a little bit more favourable than maybe the other group has been. I think we're going to find it a bit more as the season progresses and as kind of Ling tries to kind of put a stamp on it. I mean, when you get to those kind of championship contests, I think that's probably going to be the most fascinating thing with no Cody obviously there on the sideline. It's a completely kind of new era to it, But I mean, I don't think there's any problem with the production line. You see Kieran's are in the Croke Cup final again next week, and sometimes I'm looking at these schools thing now. It's a bit more interesting in terms of there's a lot of guys around the Kilkenny under 20 team. They won the All-Ireland last year because under 20's gone back. A lot of guys obviously in school till under 19 kind of involved there, So you have that, you have the Ballyhale factor. The Cork ones have kind of come into the frame for a couple of games this year. So I think there is kind of a well of talent coming through. I've obviously mentioned Drennan. It's about kind of utilising them, but reading between the lines of TJ's quotes, it is kind of interesting. I'd say Ling is obviously still, pinning a fair amount of hope and his plans kind of around him, and is obviously looking to facilitate him in any way possible, as you would, at this stage of his career, when he's had a long club campaign. I mean, what worth he wants to see him in Division 1 Group B games. It's more about, need you shining on the 23rd of April. And maybe it's because of the new structure that he can afford to miss the league. If the league was ending in April and Kilkenny weren't out as before they used to be, they used to get a bye as Leinster champions. We mightn't see them till the second week of June in a Leinster semi-final. But when you look at it now, if he's talking to him kind of in mid-February and it's we're not playing the 23rd of April, it's a 2-month period, and maybe it's just a better fit all around for everyone that he kind of manages his time until then.
Yeah, Porter says Kilkenny will definitely win Leinster. Joe Butler clarifies the players that are away. James Maher, Richie Leahy, Conor Brown and Mikey Kerry, all players that you'd imagine would feature strongly around the middle area of the field. Cassius King says, school hurling doesn't define the future though, really, lads. Well, especially I would have said with the concentration of talent into a couple of schools within the likes of Kilkenny as well. And then obviously the Offaly schools hurling, it's basically the best of the best put together.
I'm not saying they're going to make an immediate step up, but I just do think it can be a very, very relevant kind of a feeder thing now with so many guys. It's almost like an under-19 competition. Look, it'll take an exceptional talent to kind of make the step up straight away. The most obvious example in the game at the moment is Shane O'Brien. This time last year, he was playing for Skull Reached, and now he's playing pretty consistently. I mean, is he going to lock down that corner forward position?
The closest to goal position where Galan has been, assuming that Galan isn't involved. Maybe he will be.
Yeah, and he's been really, really good in the bits that I've seen him in terms of that kind of ball winner and his movement. And he doesn't look kind of really, really physically powerful, but it's kind of his movement and his positioning and his ability to kind of get the shot off. He looks really, really impressive. So, it's going to be an interesting one to see, does he lock down that spot?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of what Billy Drennan has been doing so far this year, but I'm keen, and he scored 129, 23 of that from place ball, so 1-6 from play. I'm interested to see who will come up against this weekend. Will it be, for example, I'm not sure if Paddy Smith is fit to play, could be Andy Dunphy, could be Paddy Doyle, could be Owen O'Donnell. Either way, Dublin always have some very strong back, so he's going to get a serious test. And the other thing is, at underage level coming up to this, like he was a fresher last year, he would have been probably able to physically overwhelm a lot of lads. But now he's going to be up against lads who are probably just as strong, if not stronger than him, because he's quite young. And they'll be putting him on his right-hand side an awful lot. Like, he's very good on his left, but they'll really find out this year if he's got both sides, because, you know, players will mark him that way. But look, he's got a lot of talent, so I'd imagine he would have the answers there. We'll just go through some of the lower league stuff before we taper down before the end of the show. So Kildare against Kerry this weekend. A Kildare win will more or less secure them progress through to the, I suppose, to the league final. Kerry obviously need a victory here as well. They're on 4 points from 2 games, but to draw a level with Kildare, they'll need to win this one. Offaly are against Carlow. We obviously already talked to Michael a bit about Offaly this year. Carlow didn't have a great start to the year, and they need a win. They've only 1 win from 3. And then also jumping down also into a downer against Derry. And I saw an interesting stat. 30 years ago this month, Down beat Kilkenny, who had 13 of their 1992 All-Ireland winning team, in a league game at Nolan Park. Isn't that quite something?
Yeah, like that was a really good era for Down. Like they won, or they got to the All-Ireland semi-final in 1982, having won Leinster, and then that game. And there's actually Dennis Walsh's Hurling Revolutionaries book. There's a chapter dealing a bit with kind of Down and Kerry, kind of their brief kind of forays in the 90s. But memory serves me correct, I have to double check it. But there was huge celebrations after this league win. And I think when they got back into the hotel, like that game was in Kilkenny, wasn't it? The Down beat them. Yeah.
Nolan Park, yeah.
Whatever hotel or wherever they were staying for food. I think it might have been maybe someone like Portlaoise, but like I think they got a standing ovation. You know, word had filtered through that this was the Down hurling team. You know, there was drinks and they had a good old night and all that, like, you know, and it was a huge, obviously, thing for them, being able to kind of celebrate it. But just on the games you kind of talked about there, the Kildare, Kerry, Offaly, Carlow, that's going to be really, really significant. Like you could argue a couple of weeks ago that Offaly Kerry game was one of the biggest matches of that particular weekend, and Offaly managed to win by a point in Killarney. Probably not usually a venue for Offaly hurlers to be playing it, like, but if it's going to shape up that it's kind of between Offaly and Kildare, that's looking like it could be a pretty big one, because obviously from Kildare's point of view, it's about trying to, I suppose, kind of stabilise, having won the Christy Ring Cup, got relegated from Joe McDonough, now back up again, trying to stabilise. But if they were, that would feel pretty momentous, I think, if they were the ones to get through this year and to get up to kind of Division 1 hurling. But there's obviously a bit to go yet.
Yeah. Okay, Division 2B, London are against Sligo, Tyrone, Meath, and Donegal are against Wicklow. Actually, Donegal, they'll be without Danny Cullen and Stephen Gillespie. Boss Mickey McCann said Danny's making good progress, but this game has come about a week too early for him, and Stephen's on his honeymoon. Division 3A, Roscommon are against Armagh, Louth Fermanagh, and Mayo against Monaghan. And finally, Division 3B, Longford against Lancashire, and Cavan against Leitrim. What game are you looking forward to most this weekend?
Tip Waterford, I think, Saturday night. Yeah, like just... There's, you know, you've thrown another one at me now about Tipperary's record against Waterford, you know, and as much as I've said to you previously, like I find it difficult to kind of read this league in terms of the kind of significance it is and all that. I'm hopeful that I think coming to round 4 now this weekend, it's going to start to get going, you know, and I think that one will be good on Saturday night. Okay, well, brilliant stuff, Fintan. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be chatting to you again soon. No worries, Shane.
Okay, just a reminder, folks, that we've got the coaching clinic coming up this weekend. Michael Fennelly, Brick Walsh and Pat Ryan, they're all going to be down in Valley Rovers in County Cork. It should be an absolutely cracking morning of learning, and basically learn so you can teach. That's our motto there. Also, if you want to get one of the live Club GA fundraisers that we do, help raise funds for the year for your club, get on to us at events@ourgame.ie. We'd be only too delighted to bring a show to you. One final thing, we've got the Stephen Poacher and Enda Varley show coming up this evening, so keep an eye out for that. It'll be on the YouTube channel and obviously ourgame.ie and all the rest of it. So we'll chat to you again on Monday.